Today we're on part 4 of the Confessions of a Prophet, and of course that's myself. I'm doing a lot of confessing here these days, just to clear the air, to begin to get to the place to where people know me more, know more about me, because we're going into a stage of the ministry and with the vision that people need to really know, what it is we're doing and who it is that's kind of heading up this thing. I mean, we know God's the one that's actually heading it up, but at the same time, there needs to be some accountability. And I think the best way to start it with accountability is to begin to have some past. Let's look at the record. Let's see, where you came from, what you're made of. We're in a season of elections, and politicians are doing a lot of talking about themselves, a lot about their accomplishments. And, very few ministers actually talk about their failures. I mean, that's not something they really want to broadcast. It's not my intentions to want to come off as being pure, perfect, and, above all. That's not at all. My point of view is coming in saying, hey, I don't care how bad you are. The Lord will take you. The Lord will use you. And he'll use you sometimes greater than those who have tried to make themselves perfect. Because he's not looking for the perfect. He's looking for the broken. He's looking for those who've been thrown under the bus, kicked to the curb. He's looking for those people who are ready to see their life change. And I guess that even comes to the point of how we have this title today. Get lost, meet Jesus. And sometimes that's what it takes, is just to come undone. And I think a lot of people do. They get to the place to where they don't feel like the church is doing anything for them. They don't feel like they're getting anywhere. They can't see how this is beneficial other than just having some place to go and meet some friends and, have some potluck dinners or whatever you want to call it, to fellowship. That's basically the main thing. And then also some praise and worship, sing-alongs. That really helps. And I think that's something everybody does need. But when you get down to the point of finding out who you are in Christ, that's a lot more personal. That's a lot more of a situation where you actually have to walk it out. And I'm just walking it out and telling you what I've gone through from the time I was born until we come to the time where we're at this present. Because believe me, I've been on the bad side of a lot of things. I hadn't always been what people might consider to be good. I'm not really a good person. I'm a better person. But, there's only one perfect, and that's Jesus. So I'm trying to live in his image and do the best I can, and I've done a lot better the last 30 years of my life than I have the first 30 years. I think most everybody can say that. Maybe not. I just find it's a lot. I would rather trust somebody coming to me who has been in the dark places, has been in the streets, or, even found themselves doing something hideous, then they were in, the upper echelon of the pay scale, and, they were caught doing something wrong, and they were broken out, and now they're ready to change their life. I'd rather take somebody like that than somebody that comes in and says, I've never done anything wrong. I never told a lie. I never done anything that was dishonest. I've always been, faithful. And then, I see that person doesn't take very long before they get so pious, they wind up just going nuts and going out and doing things that just hurt everybody. So, there is a point in all of us that we know we're flesh, but we also have the Spirit of God living in us. He's reborn us into that Spirit, but we're still in the flesh. So we know we have to fight the flesh. We know there's a war going on in us all the time between the Spirit and the flesh. And sometimes the flesh wins. Let's just admit it. There's times we don't stay as sanctified as we think we can. I'm sure the disciples felt the same way when, they saw what Jesus went through, and it just shattered all their plans. They had no idea. What are we going to do now? I mean, this is not the way this is supposed to go. But at this point in time, I'm starting at a point where we've already gone through all my elementary school years and through high school. And coming out of high school, was in 1969, 70s when I graduated. And at that particular point in time, I'd lived my high school years through the 60s, which, Woodstock, I mean, the Beatles came in 1964 into the United States. Everything started to change just as I was, in junior high, and then just continued to go on a rage for the next few years. Jimi Hendrix died of overdose of drugs. Charlie Manson did all his heinous things and had his people do some horrible things. And there was Janis Joplin died of overdose of drugs. She was a wild woman. There was a lot of people dying from drugs, and this is during the Vietnam War, which I had a lot of friends which went to Vietnam, fought in Vietnam. I tried, but my friends weren't going to let me. And in fact, they said, "Man, your number's so high, you'll never be called up. You don't go." I really wanted to, but they really threatened me. But I stayed in school, and after I graduated from high school, I just felt like, well, my life is free now to do something different. And I even left home before I was out of high school. There was a lot of contention in my home growing up, and it was just a place where I just couldn't really deal with it very well. And my rebellion, because it was my years of rebellion, high school years. And so I left, and my best friend and I, we rented a run-down old duplex. It basically was an army barrack turned into a one-bedroom, one-bath kitchen and a living room. That's all it was. I slept on the sofa in the living room, and he had the bedroom. We were paying equal pay, but he took care of a lot more things of the electricity and that sort of thing, so he got the upper end of it. But it was okay. We were friends. We'd been friends since high school, and that was something that kind of worked. We worked at the same place. We worked at the newspaper office in town. We both were in college, taking the same degree. We had the same classes. We worked at the same job. So we were pretty close for a long period of time there, and it was not always work. I mean, we worked quite a bit, but something when we started college, I found out something really unusual that. Here I am paying for my college and I'm working to pay for it, plus taking care of myself. And I was making better grades in college because I was working hard at it. Because if I'm going to put money into it, then, I'm going to make sure I get something out of it. That wasn't the same case when I was going to school, especially during high school and junior high. I didn't want to be in school. I felt like it was prison. I thought, I didn't sign up for this, but I have to do it by law. So therefore, my rebellion was, I'm not going to get into this. I just don't want to get into it. I don't like it. I don't understand it. I don't want to spend my time doing this. I'm bored. But when I got into college, I wasn't bored because, Tommy and I, my friend, we were working 60 hours a week and going to school. We had 9 hours of classes. That's just the class time, the 9 hours. So, we were pushing it pretty hard to put in 60 hours a week of work and then 9 hours of class and then very little time for study. But my grades improved dramatically because I had invested in it. And I found that something true for those who do have to work through college and pay a lot of it on their own, do work a lot harder at it. They work to make it work. At the life at the newspaper office was interesting because the fact is, Tommy and I knew that there was no way we were going to ever really be able to just have our parents take care of anything. So we were taking care of ourselves. But it was kind of neat because we wanted to let our hair grow out. I mean, that was the time where everybody was doing that sort of thing. And, with long hair, you couldn't go get a job just anywhere. And I mean, it was very hard to find a job. You could usually work in the oil field and take a lot of hackling and a lot of prodding from the old timers, or the other place was in the newspaper office because it was somewhere where you could work in that liberal state of mind. And we worked in the circulation department, which basically we just handled the newspapers and caught them off the press, bundled them up, got them routed to the right direction, load them in trucks, and take our trucks and go deliver them out to the carriers. And so that's part of what we did. But weekends came along, and we worked all night and day nearly on each weekend, because that was a big issue. The Sunday paper was a big deal. We had a Saturday issue as well. And then every once in a while they had special holidays and things, and that would really make it hard. So it was a lot of hours, but it was the only place we could work with long hair. And we did a lot of inserts, inserting the newspaper. Like your ads you have in your newspapers. Well, those had to be put in at that time by hand. So we would have to have maybe somewhere around 200,000 newspapers that we've got a bunch of people in there that are inserting these advertisements into the newspaper, and then stacking them up and getting them ready to go out, because they'd print them in advance, in advance, so that we could insert that into the large, more current news as it came off the presses. So while we're doing that, we're all listening to loud music. For some people would back their cars up into the Bay Area, where they put the big rolls of paper that the press used to run the newspaper through. And it was kind of neat to have the music playing. And of course, there was drugs. I have to admit, there was drugs in and out of there all the time. It was a place where a lot of us worked at night. We were downtown, so having loud music didn't bother anybody, and it was all right, for what we were doing at that time. But it was also a place where, there were times where people would find Jesus, and it was amazing. One song that was my favorite was "Spirit in the Sky," and that song just really resonated with me. And still today, I have it on my phone. I have it on my iPods. I've got that thing on so many different devices, so that I can listen to it anytime I feel the urge, because it was really, really a great song for that time. And it talked about the Spirit of God, and going to heaven, and it was really, really unique. But a lot of songs at that time talked about God. A lot of songs during, that period of time with the Creedence Clearwater Revival. What's the revival? What's the revival of mankind, coming to God, and the experiment of living in the times where we lived. So there was a lot of stuff going on, but during that period of time, there was really no place to study. It was kind of hard for that, because, if you're living in a shotgun housing deal, which basically there was 6 of these duplexes together, and on the same road. It was a dirt road, by the way. It was way out in the country, and you wonder why anybody would do that, but it was kind of slumlord type renting. And everybody that lived out there either worked in the oil fields or worked at the newspaper office, and we were all friends. We had all been in school together. We all knew each other. So, it was a rowdy place, because when there was no work going on for certain groups, if the oil field guys were off for 2 weeks, well, they were having parties and people around there all the time, and it was just a real busy place. And it was a place where also you couldn't study. I mean, that was the hard part. So I would try to find some time to make it into the library in between getting out of class and going to the newspaper to work, and try to get as much done as I could. Didn't always finish it, but that was the best I was able to do at that particular point in time. So, it was an interesting period. It was also a time I felt like I was really getting away from God. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. It was not a time where I was going to church. It wasn't a time where I was reading my Bible. It wasn't a time when I was I would pray a few times. There was times where I needed some help getting through the grade system and all that. And God was faithful, but I was not living what you'd call a Christian life. Let's just say that. But, it goes on to say, that one thing about finding a girlfriend in that period of time, everybody cruised the streets. You made the main drag, is the way we call it, and you go down one street and you'd hit Kenny's hamburger place. You circle around it, and then you go to the Wagon Wheel, circle around that, then go to McEden's, go around that. Then you make the round all back again, and the whole time you're driving through, looking real slow to see who all's there, and to see if you can meet a girl. Now, the object of it was that you couldn't really find a girl unless you had a a nice car or long hair. That was the only two things. Well, neither one of us, Tommy or I, could afford a nice car, so we grew our hair out, and that's the reason why we grew our hair out, because we wanted to, find somebody that we could say we're dating, and that was always an interesting thing, because we were also in a very strong habitation of cowboys, rednecks, and there was fights going on all the time, and it was just not like it is today. Cars were very important. People, really thought a lot about their cars, but today it doesn't seem like that's too much of an interest to kids. It's just a main means of transportation. That's about it. How much digital attachments it has is probably more important than what the mufflers sound like, or how loud the pipes are. And as we, would cruise up and down the main drag, it'd be day or night. Whenever we had a chance, we'd go. There was a day I was headed down the road, and Tommy was with me, and probably a couple of other guys in the back, and coming the opposite direction was two girls in a Camaro, a copper Camaro. Well, as we passed each other, I looked at the driver looked at me, and it was just, there was a contact. There was a chemistry right there automatically. And so we turned back around and asked them if they wanted to go to the park and play Frisbee. That was a big thing he did back then. Go hang out at the city parks. There was a number of city parks in Odessa at that time, and still are probably today. I don't know. I hadn't been there in a long time. But they, you knew something was mixed. Something was happening here. Something was changing. And so it didn't take too long before we were married. And I'll just call her Sharon for lack of a better name to say for today. And, we worked at the newspaper office together. We got our own place, a little rent house, 1-bedroom rent house, and, still going to school and still trying to make it. She was still in high school, believe it or not. I was 19 and she was just turning 17. So, we were too young to get married, that's for sure. But we didn't know. We felt like, well, this is what everybody does, so this is what we're going to do. And, it was fine for a while until there came a point in time where we knew that we needed to do something different, but we didn't know exactly what it was. We couldn't just keep working at the newspaper forever. If we're going to get on in life, we got to do something different. Well, I took Sharon to go meet my aunt and uncle in Big Spring. My uncle was an evangelist. I mean, he owned a furniture store, him and my aunt, but he was an evangelist at heart. He evangelized at the prison. He would go to church, to the county jail, every Sunday after church, and he did that for 33 years faithfully, leading people to the Lord. And so it wasn't a surprise to me that he led Sharon to the Lord, and so that really started a change in our life. Then when we were back in Odessa, and I was going to school, and my business machines instructor stopped me as I was going down the stairwell, and she said, and the business machines were basically, learning how to run calculators and adding machines, typewriters, key punch operators, that kind of thing. So she stopped me and she says, there's a new bank going to open up in town, and you need to go interview there, and here's the information how to do that. And I thought, why is she telling me? I've got long hair. I don't dress like any kind of individual that would be working in a bank, So I thought it was real odd, but at the same time, that surge of faith, knowing that I knew in my spirit that God wanted me to do this. I knew I had this job. Now, she didn't say I had a job. She just said a new bank's coming. They're going to be hiring. You need to go check it out. Why me? Only God knows. But she did whatever she was led to do, I guess, and it prompted me. So I went and had my hair cut, shorter than it is right now, and then I charged 2 new suits. And I'm going on an interview. Why you need 2 suits? But I knew I had the job, and I didn't want to wear the others once the same suit I interviewed in. I didn't want to wear the same day at the first day of work. So I got the job. I took a $200 cut in pay, and I was going to have to change up my schedule for school because my hours were 7 in the morning until 7 at night, and I had 30 minutes off for lunch. So my first class for night class started at 7 o'clock. So there was no way I was going to make it on time. But in college, it really didn't matter. I mean, it wasn't like you had an attendance. Somebody's going to call roll. You're either there or you're not. You either make the grade or you don't. It's just one of those things. You're paying for it, so it's your loss if you don't get what you paid for. So anyway, I went that direction, and then Sharon got a job at the school system and the independent school district, running a key punch machine, getting into the computer age. And so that worked out, but it also separated us because, that way we didn't see each other as much as we were before when we worked at the newspaper office, and we spent all our time together except for the time I had to go to school. And it really made a difference. It separated us and made it real hard to have the relationship we had before. So in our third year of marriage, one of my friends that worked at the bank, him and his wife didn't have any kids either. We didn't have kids, and we'd do things together, go to Mexico together, go on short trips together. We'd probably meet up with them, usually on the weekend, and play cards or do something. And so it was okay. I mean, we were just being married people at the time, but all of a sudden things started to change, and then I realized that my wife was falling for my friend, and my friend was moving in on my marriage, and I was just really perplexed by this. I couldn't believe that this was actually happening. I talked to his wife, and I said, "Do you know something's going on here?" And she said, "No. They're just good friends." I said, "No, I think you better get ready. This is a lot more serious than just being friends." And sure enough, it turned out to be just exactly as I was sensing. But I look back at a lot of those times when when we lived for a little bit. Tommy moved out of the little rent house that we had, and Sharon moved in there. When we first got married, and while we were there, I remember coming home one day, and I had some things growing in a 55-gallon drum behind the house there, and we had some stuff stuck in the lettuce in the refrigerator, and I pulled up in the driveway, and all of a sudden the Spirit of God said, "Have you noticed anybody's been home?" And I thought, "What are you talking about?" Well, I hadn't seen anybody. I hadn't been partying with anybody, and I realized that everybody was missing. Nobody was living in those duplexes. They must have all moved out. And then the Lord said, "They're coming for you next." And I thought, what is he's saying? But then I figured it out. Okay, I know what he's saying. So I went in the house, took the head of lettuce out, tipped over the 55-gallon drum, dumped everything out of it, and then went on to work. Come to find out, they came while I was gone, and there was nothing to be found. So a lot of those old friends of mine wound up, being put in jail for holding drugs. I didn't. God spared me. Now, why would he do that? Why would God do that to somebody who's not going to church, not reading the Bible, not praying faithfully? Why would he do that? He altered the course and destiny of my life by speaking to me and warning me about what was about to happen. Now, I told you, I'm telling you confessions. I'm confessing truths. I'm not making anything up. Why would I want to make that up? But I'm telling you, it doesn't matter what you've done in your past. God will forgive you. In fact, he never left you. If you're born again, he never has left you. You might feel like you're all alone at times, but it's not. You're not. He's there. He's omnipotent. He can be at all places at all times. He's omnipresent. He's there whether you realize it or not. Now, I've learned over the years, the more I talk to him, the more he talks to me. But if I don't talk to him, he doesn't really talk to me that often. Now, he might tell me when I'm about to get in a jam, and I hadn't talked to him in a long time, and I'm thankful for that. But it really spared a lot of humiliation in life. But, after that first year, a lot of things changed. Went to work for the bank. She went to work for the school system. Then, our friends, we wound up going to church. We joined a church, which was the church of her mom's choice. Her mom had been to church a few times, really didn't know anybody. But we started church there, and it didn't take very long for the pastor and I to really connect. And he put me in charge of the finance committee. He made me an elder, and I'm thinking, wow, I hadn't even been here a year, and you're doing all this. It was like too much of a load, actually, because, I had a lot of things put on me to do. I had a lot of scheduling to do anyway. Working just the hours I was working at the bank was enough, but I did it, and it was okay. But that was after Sharon received the Lord from my uncle, leading her in the Lord's Prayer. But after a period of time, all that turned south, and when I lost everything, when I lost her to what I thought was a friend, it turned out that I learned a lot of things that one year. I learned that, things are very fragile. I was very humiliated. I was totally disgusted with myself. I felt like such a failure because nobody, all of my cousins, my uncles, aunts, grandparents, nobody had ever gotten a divorce. Never. I was the first. And that was what made it so bad. My grandmother on my dad's side, she lost her husband when she was 44 years old, and she never remarried. And at the time, she had 5 boys living at home that she had to take care of. One of them was my dad. And so I just felt like, my life's over, because the rule was you don't remarry. And you never have a divorce. That was just totally taboo. So I all of a sudden became what I considered to be the black sheep of the family. But some years later, people started losing their marriages. Things started falling apart because really everything that's happened in the 60s changed a lot of what we have in moral values. It changed a lot in our lifestyles. There was no peer pressure anymore for living a life that was promiscuous. There was no real penalty for being a jerk. I mean, really, there was people that were bad, but usually they were dealt with. People, policed other people. The peer pressure was different. The peer pressure wasn't to see if you could do something as bad as I. No, it was to make sure you stayed in line like the rest of us. But things had changed in the 60s, free love and women's lib and the war and the rebellion against the war. I mean, there was so much that changed our society and as a people. So I felt like I was on the front end of the bad end of the stick. I felt like I was getting whooped. So as I went through that particular point in time in my life, I realized that, this place is really hard to deal with, because not having a friend and losing your wife too was really bad. Tommy had already married too. We married at the same time. I was his best man. He was my best man. And he moved off to another part of Texas, which we weren't that much in touch after that. So I was really kind of all alone. In fact, I remember that Thanksgiving, that after that I was driving my little Volkswagen in town. I was still working at the bank, and it's Thanksgiving Day, and everybody's off work, and there's not too many people on the street. And I pulled up to a stop sign to a stoplight, and right up next to me was a DJ that I knew, and he wasn't married. And I rolled down my window, I hollered at him. I said, "Hey, where are you going for Thanksgiving?" He says, I don't have any plans. I said, "Well, let's go to the restaurant. I hear they're open." It was a Furs restaurant, I believe is what it was. And so we went there and had our Thanksgiving dinner together. Now, that felt really lonely. Didn't feel like I could go have Thanksgiving with the family that gathered every year, my uncles and aunts and cousins, because I just got through going through a divorce, and I didn't divorce her. She divorced me, and, I don't guess you can do anything about it when it happens to you. And I know some of you have already been through things like that. Some of you haven't. And if you hadn't had to go through that, gosh, praise God, because it's not easy to deal with, really. I could deal with somebody passing away, losing your mate that way than being divorced, because when you still love them and they're still in the area, they're not gone. They're still here, but you can't have that relationship anymore. It's over with. It's dead, but they're not dead. And so if you're dead, it's final. But there's something about that person still living on that makes it real hard. And I'm talking to you probably on a level that some of you can relate to, maybe some not. But really, it's well worth fighting through whatever the issues are to stay together if you can. Now, there's times where you just can't do that. I mean, I understand that, and I know I don't want to put anybody under the law. I'd be the last person to do that, because if I were to do that, I'd be putting myself in stricter condemnation than I'm trying to put you under. Everybody needs to have grace. Everybody needs to extend grace. But we don't need to be so lenient with it that we don't have any boundaries. And I think that's what we lost. We've lost the boundaries that once existed, and we're fighting to get them back, and it's really difficult to do that, because once they're lost, they're really hard to resurrect. But there's always something that can happen, and that's what I want to try to get into here before too many Sundays, is to start talking about what's going to happen prophetically in our nation for 2020. There's some things that the Lord's been revealing that are really, really powerful, and need to be told. But I can't do that until He releases me to do that. But when I do, I'll let you know when it's time to do that. Now, you would think my life ended right there, losing my love, my first wife to a friend, lost a friend. But it doesn't stop there. I get deeper and deeper into this revolving door of issues that keep recreating themselves, and I want to know why. God, why is this happening to me? I didn't know I was such a bad person, but there was those times where people take advantage of you when you're at your weakest point. And so that's where we'll pick up next week. But I just want you to be reassured of the fact that you can't do anything so bad that God won't use you and He won't take you back. He never left you. He never lost you. You can't outdo what salvation has done by the blood of Jesus. You can't outdo it. You can't run away from it. You can't break away from it. I've heard people say, well, I'm not going to trust God anymore. I'm going on my own. And it doesn't take very long before they hit a snare in life and they can't handle it, and they start crying out to God. And He'll be there. He always does. He always comes back. He always comes back at your time of need. But why get so far away in the first place? Can't we learn to live together, work together, and worship together? I believe God's preparing a place for that. And I know it's called the campus. Now, you might think I weaved that in there on purpose, but I didn't, because really my whole point of even seeing the vision was I know without a doubt, is God's answer to us getting our moral values and moral compass back in line. Because if you're living together, worshiping together, and working together, you're not going to be inundated with all the perversion that's in the world today. We need to be separated from that, because we're supposed to separate. To be sanctified in Christ is to be separated from the world. And that's what the campus will do, is give that separation for us. I am so blessed that so many people are starting to see the value of the campus. Even though they might not have plans to move there right away, they're considerate at some point in time in their life, but it's sure going to be a great place to go visit and experience the miracle trail, the places to see how people will eat different. The values of living there is so much of the things that are good, because so much of our food today is created just for profit only, just for money. And so they put just about anything in it to get it sold. They make it taste like they think people want it to taste, and even induce something in it to make you actually feel that that's good, sense it's good, and even create a hunger to come back for more. There are actually additives that are in that food system that we're fighting with. But we also know that a lot of those things that are added in there add problems to our lives, to our bodies, to our health. And what we're working toward is to take care of the temple of God. The Bible says we are the temple of God. and we're required to take care of the temple. Well, to require to be taking care of the temple means we got to change some things, because we can't keep eating the way we're eating. We got to start living differently. And so this gives an opportunity. And when you've got a whole community of people doing the same thing, you're working toward the benefit of the blessing of others, because it's a lot harder to do something all by yourself than it is to have a group of people who are working toward the same goals, to create themselves in a way to where God will be blessed by it, but also God will use us mightily through His Spirit and by His power to change the lives of others. It will be a model of more and more campuses to begin to spring up under other leadership and other parts of the world, and hopefully in the United States, all over the United States, because it will change life altogether in a big, big way. And we'll see. We're a model. We're the example. And I'm just looking for people who are interested to be a part of that. Because if you want to get free from the things of this world, you got to sanctify yourself and become part of the sanctuary of the campus. So be it. God bless you all today. Help support us in the campus if you can. I'd appreciate it. And look forward to seeing you next week when this continues, the Confessions of a Prophet. So be it. Amen.